Okay, as we get everybody settled, Yakov, turn it up.
Once.
Hello, hello, hello. Yeah. Okay. Everybody can hear me now. Um, for those of you in New Jersey, hi. Okay. Is this more normal? Is this a little bit better? I'll talk softer. If you want me to talk louder, go like this. If you don't want me to talk, go. It is off and on. Okay. Anyway, it is really an honor and a privilege for me to interview Dave Roberts. He's a rather new employee, 4 months, and his title is Capital Projects Manager. And we talked about what we wanted to cover today. And normally we go through the background and where he's been and where he's come from a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think we're gonna have to do that this time. We'll see.
That one's better. Now I'm talking. Okay. Anyway, excuse the short interruptions, but then we're going to talk what I call the quick five. I've got some questions, Dave. And at the end, Dave will spend some time talking to you about his vision, his experiences about the project. Not the big dig behind Cynthia Lee's, but about what's going on with the renovation. And at the end, we will have a Q&A. So please hold your questions until we get there because I'm sure Dave and I will answer a lot of those as we go into it. Okay, let's start with, hi, Dave.
Hi.
Um, give us a background on you, your education, and things like that.
Yeah. So I was born in Perth in Western Australia. Many of you will know it's considered to be the most remote city in the world. And I have two brothers in my family, and my father was in construction, and so I had a background in construction. But I think one of the important things early in my life was that when I was 6, my family had a house designed for us by an architect, and that house ended up being a very important part of our family. It was unusual in its design. It really responded to the West Australian climate. It was cool and didn't require any air conditioning in the 100-degree summers. It faced north to receive the winter sun and had enormous sliding doors and a courtyard in order to open up the entire house in the afternoon to receive the sea breezes that came off the Indian Ocean, which we overlooked. So this house we were very proud of, but it also gave me insight into how small decisions can affect people in a very profound way. And so the architect was a good friend of our family, and I sort of had a rapport with him. And so that is really the root of my, professional interest in design and I will say that I still have Tony Solarsky was the architect of that house, and I have his architect's desk at my home now, which he designed for himself and had made for himself. So I'm very proud to have that. And he also designed my dad's desk as well, which my brother has. So, he's very much still part of our family in that way too. What else do you want to know about?
Well, you told me that you went into architecture in college.
Yep.
And your say career through college was here, there, and everywhere.
Well, yeah. I first came to the States in '86, and I had worked for an American practice in Australia who had been selected to design Australia's new Parliament House. That was a massive project, like $1 billion project, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Almost. And so because I'd worked for them, part of my degree was you had to take a year work experience after 3 years before finishing your degree. And so I decided to come to the States because of my experience with that architecture practice. And so in '86, I worked in New York City and had just the most amazing experience. I mean, it was just fabulous. And I was living in Manhattan, and I worked for a small practice. And I always say that the two architects I worked for, I called the odd couple of architecture, because they were always arguing with each other, and they were sort of opposites, and on a daily basis would throw up the sash of the window and offer the sill to their partner so that they could push the other one out the window. But it was just a tremendous year. They were very supportive of my endeavors, and it made a big impression on me. Made a big impression because in Australia we kind of followed the more English, more traditional approach to architecture. What I found in New York was that, is this going in and out again? Everything was designed to get things done and make decisions and not put it off to the next week. And even as a student, I was given pretty important decisions to make. And I really liked that. I really responded to that. In that year, I met my first wife, and we returned. We ended up living in Australia for a number of years together in Melbourne. And we have two sons who were born in Australia, and then we ended up moving back here 29 years ago when they were 2 and 5. And so that was sort of the reason why I ended up in the States, but also why I ended up in the Hudson Valley. Was because my first wife grew up in the Hudson Valley, and we wanted to be close to New York City. And so we moved to New Paltz, and we bought a house on Prospect Street. So that was my intro to New Paltz. Almost 30 years ago, we arrived on July 4th, 1995.
Wow, what a celebration. Well, the thing that I'm sure people would be very interested in, I know having gone there, is Perth is like being in San Francisco versus Melbourne being in DC, right? Both sides of the country.
Both sides of the country. And Perth is it's a very easy lifestyle. It's a very warm climate, it's a Mediterranean climate. And whenever I go back there, I respond to that. It is very relaxed lifestyle in Perth. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about it, and one of the things before my wife and I went to tour Australia, we read Bill Bryson's book, In a Sunburned Country. And if you haven't read any of Bill Bryson's books, you will. And then when you're on an airplane and you hear somebody laugh out loud, he's reading a Bill Bryson book. He's really very clever, very thing. But the one thing about this book, and I want to approach you about, is he said of the 26 known venomous, poisonous species, Australia has 24. What was your experience with any of those 24?
Well, growing up, we would have, there's also spiders, of course, and the common one for us was the redback spider. And, we'd see them in the garden, and the thing was you just left them alone. And same with the snakes. So Australians tend to have a pretty lackadaisical response to poisonous wildlife. And I'll also say that, when I was a kid and we go swimming at the beach, quite often there was someone would yell out, "Oh, there's a shark in the water." So, everyone get out, and so 10 minutes later, everyone would start to get back in the water again because, it's just a shark after all.
Well, he did mention something about a box jellyfish.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's also, I don't have I haven't experience with the box jellyfish, but there's also, we just call them blueies. They have a long stinger that's blue and they wrap around your legs. You'd see them from time to time.
We see a few of those, but
yeah.
Anyway, so you were able to dodge spiders, snakes, and all other things.
I did have a pet kangaroo when I was a child.
Now, that I didn't know. Okay.
So my brother went with a friend to, on his friend's farm. And as you do, they went out kangaroo shooting at night and shot the mother and then found that it had a little joey. And so they brought the joey home. And it was about, I want to say it was probably only weeks old. And we fed it with an eyedropper, fed it goat milk. And so we had the kangaroo for about 6 months. And what we did was you would get a sweater and sew the bottom of the sweater, and it would jump into the neck of the sweater. And then you could tie the sweater, to the back of a chair or even around your waist if you wanted to. And it's viewed that as its home. And after 6 months, we had to get rid of the kangaroo because it could, hop pretty fast at that point. And being in the suburbs, it wasn't ideal. It has a happy ending, this story, though, because 18 years later, we gave it away to a refuge, Katie the kangaroo. And 18 years later, the woman that ran the refuge wrote her autobiography. And there on the cover of her book was Katie the kangaroo. And so Katie lived a long, happy life in the kangaroo refuge.
That's great. Well, the other thing that I think everybody, and that's where I've got my hat on, was you weren't in Australia in 2000?
No.
You had left in 95? Yeah, because that was when they filmed Crocodile Dundee just before the 2000 Olympics. So I thought it was interesting. We're sitting here after the 2024 Olympics talking about it. But this might nod to Australia. Okay. Family and hobbies. You mentioned your wife, and you have a daughter.
Yeah, I have a daughter as well. I've been married 3 times. Third time's a charm. And I have 3 children, Oliver, Harrison, and Sophia. And my eldest son is an artist. He went to the Art Institute of Chicago, graduated from there, and he's now doing his master's in Melbourne in Australia. And actually is closing out a show right at the moment. And my middle son is in sales. He works for a Swiss company that manufactures espresso machines. He heads sales in the northeast of the States. And then my daughter is at Barnard, and she's going into her 3rd year at Barnard in Manhattan.
Excellent.
Proud dad.
Excellent. Well, one of the things talking with David was his hobby. And I'm going to look around the room, and he amazes me because he's a marathon runner.
So running is really a passion for me. As a kid, I competed in cross country at a national level in Australia, and track and field. So, I've been paying a lot of attention to the Olympics. The 1500 and 3000 were my races. And when I was 17, I read a book. Well, some of you will be familiar with James Fix. He wrote the complete book of running in the 70s. And I read that when I was 16. And and then he died. But he wrote a chapter on the Boston Marathon, and I thought, wow, that seems like just such an extraordinary thing. And back in those days, the people that I was inspired by were Bill Rogers, who ran won Boston a number of times, and also a woman called Catherine Switzer. So at 16, I decided I was going to run a marathon, and 6 months later, I ran my first marathon. And my dad, who had been a lifelong runner, saw me training for it and said, "Oh, well, I have a shot at that too." And so he ran his first marathon, at the same race that I did. And he went on to run several more and ran his last when he was 80. I've run a few now. I ran Berlin in 22 and Chicago. I've run Boston a couple of times and New York. I'll run Boston again in the spring. Running, actually, the great thing about running is that, and it really got me through COVID actually, was I have this great group of people and we hang out and chat and go through, all the things that are going on in our lives. And we just happen to run for, 12 or 14 or 15 or 20 miles while we're having a conversation. And I have to say that during COVID, those runs were that Sunday morning long run was what I really looked forward to, because that was the time when I was spending time with other people. I'll also add that, I mentioned Catherine Switzer. Now, she was the first woman to run in Boston, and she entered under her name Kay Switzer. She just put a letter in there. And of course, it was before women were allowed to run marathons. And so when the race director saw that a woman was in his race, he famously tried to physically push her out of the race. And there's a very famous photo of that, of him trying to push her out, and her boyfriend at the time is trying to protect her. The lovely piece about this is that Catherine Switzer is a local runner. She and her husband live in Newports, and so I've now come to, get to know her, and she's at a lot of local races. And so this is someone that inspired me through her story. And yet now she's, someone that is part of the community here, which is really lovely.
Excellent. So I'm going to lead this into our discussions later about the renovation. So we should see a lot of treadmills around here for the residents. If you want to talk with somebody, get on the treadmill, work it off. But no, one of the ones that you talked about was Run the Ridge.
Oh, right. Yeah, Rock the Ridge. Yep. I've done that a couple of times. It's a 80K or 50 miler, and it's kind of a smell the roses. You just get out there and enjoy being outside. You just happen to be running at the same time.
Yeah. Well, when he mentioned that, back in my mind, my oldest daughter ran it one time, and she said she entered and she got to 25 miles and said, "That's far enough." And I said, "Well, at least you got that far. Who brought you back?" She said, "Well, that was a long walk." But it is interesting that you're part of that in their community.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. But the other part is now he gets done running. You see, physically fit and all that. What's your other hobby?
Well, I do enjoy baking and cooking a lot. And I love baking bread. Not so much in the warm months, but throughout 6 months a year, I bake, bread every week. But I also love making pies and tarts and cakes and all that good stuff. The crew downstairs have been the beneficiary of some of my efforts.
Yeah, and I noticed Tom Tango doesn't mention he has a Wednesday at 1 o'clock open time if you want to come visit. I think it's because of all the cakes will be disappearing. But oh, that's great. So, okay, we'll do the quick five. Favorite color?
Orange. Yep.
Orange.
It's, yeah, active. It's optimistic.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's good vitamin C. Music genre?
So I listen to more hip hop and R&B and rap than probably people might expect. But I have a pretty wide range of music that I enjoy as well. And so I was saying to you that I'm just as likely. Well, I also love those old swing tunes. So you think of Frank Sinatra and Come Fly With Me, Fly Me to the Moon, I think is one of the greatest songs ever written. So pretty broad.
Yes, very, from running to baking to Frank. Very interesting. Sports, oh no, best movie.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? But I do have a great love for Lost in Translation. I think that's a really terrific movie, a good message and funny. What was the other one? I mean, the guilty pleasure is The Devil Wears Prada, just because it's so well written and there are so many great lines in that. And Meryl Streep, great. It's good. My daughter and my wife and I have probably countless times we've watched that because it's an easy
family
watch.
film.
Yes, yeah, family favorite.
Very interesting. And this one interests me. I asked them sports team, and I'm thinking, Australia. And if you've been to the men's club, you've heard an awful lot about cricket. But tell them what's your favorite sports.
Well, it's hard. I mean, growing up, it was the Demons, who are a Australian football team, and if you've never seen Australian rules, it's like something you've never watched before. It's now the West Coast Eagles, but you become supporter of sports teams for strange reasons. Of course, I have to support the Yankees because my sons were Yankee fans. The thing about baseball is that, of course, I didn't grow up with baseball, but I developed a real enjoyment for the game watching my sons play. And, especially in spring, getting out there and seeing them play. My oldest son was a catcher, a pretty scrappy catcher. And so, I developed a knowledge and a love for the game, through my sons.
Well, it is of interest. And of course, everyone knows Rob and Tom's love for the Yankees. So you were,
and hence here I am,
welcomed. That was the thing on the CV that got you the job. Yeah. Beside the fact, the architect stuff. Well, great. I had asked about the best book that you've read, and he gave me two.
Yeah, I mean, the Vivisector by Patrick White. Now, he's an Australian author that won the Nobel Prize in the 70s, I think 73, for literature. And I think it's a very Australian book, and it's really it's quite existential, and it's reading matter, and it's really like the angst or the psyche of the artist, I would say, but tough to describe. But that's a book that I've read many times, and I really love. I think the other ones I mentioned were James Joyce, the Dead. It's a short story. The Dead I think is just a wonderful, wonderful story. And it's a great movie too, I think. But what else did I have in there?
You had James McBride.
Oh, yes, The Color of Water. So that's a recent book. I've finished that just in the last month. And what an extraordinary book that is. I mean, that's the sort of book where this is why I read, you know, because it has such a profound story. And if you don't know it, you know, his mother was Jewish, but sort of renounced her Jewishness, and she raised 12. All her children were African American. So she raised, or Jew, I guess Jewish African American, but she didn't allow that she was Jewish. She just said, "I just happen to look different to you." And it's a great story of hers and his as a mother and son, written by James McBride. Yeah.
Well, all of this is, I've hoped, has given the audience some idea of your background and your character. And one of the things that we would love to hear is your vision, your aspirations for the project. Where do you, how can you comfort these people that we're not walking off the plank on the SS Mayflower that's anchored in Hudson Bay?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the things that are important to me in design, as you've heard, is that there are small decisions that affect people every day. And I think that's what good design is about. And so to me, it's about creating environments that enhance your daily life. And, some of those things are big decisions, and some of them are, smaller things. I think what I see the potential for this project is really adding to everyone's amenity and enjoyment, and providing facilities that aid that on a daily basis, so that, and if you look at the different components that, whether it's dining or wellness and health and fitness, that those things are in place to enjoy life. In terms of, I mean, for me personally, the process is pretty fascinating too. I mean, this morning I was describing, we have this issue about how do we add on to the back of the dining room, and we're all thinking, well, we could make a big earth ramp, or we can crane over the building. These are the discussions where the collaboration becomes really, really important. And I think, actually, I met with a friend on Tuesday evening who's also an architect, and we were talking about the things we enjoy, and we both agreed it was, at the end of the day, it was the collaboration with other people, not just architects, but with clients and with other professionals, and sitting around and figuring out how things are going to be done, and also with the subcontractors, because you learn so much. I think earlier in my career, I was designing and running a project at the same time, a house for a very well-known celebrity. And, I was on site every day. And up until that point in my career, I had thought, I'm the architect, I'm the leader, I'm meant to know everything. And it was such a relief to be on site and with the carpenter or the plumber and say, well, I don't know, how are we going to figure this out? And really collaborate with people and end up with a better solution. And to me, that was a great lesson, but something that, I hope I've carried through, for the rest of my career, and that, it's really about listening to people and figuring it out together.
I think this morning at President's Council, Dave did give us an update, a little bit more details than we need to go here. But I think one of the things that I learned was being associated with Dave and Tom on this trip to Jefferson's Ferry is you came away, I felt you two came away with a sense slow is better. You know what you need to do. And you were talking about phasing this morning and how important that is. And what does that mean to the residents now?
Yeah, and that's true, and I think that was one of the things before I even took on this role was that I heard Michelle saying, "We're going to do everything right. We're not here to cut corners, and we're going to plan everything in advance." And that was very reassuring to me because it told me that Michelle has engaged consultants who have been here before. And this is before I came on, like, the developer Greystone, and gotten very good advice, financial advice, but also development advice. And that has been the sort of MO right from the start, is to do this properly and not just jump in. So many clients think, oh, right, we're going to do this. And the next day they want to start building something, right? They're very, very anxious to start. And I think, we all have sufficient experience to know, the way to do this is to plan first, and then the actual construction process will go as smoothly as we possibly can make it happen. Yeah. It's all about planning.
My dad was a fixer-upper, and he always told me, measure twice, cut once.
Well, Michelle has improved on that and said measure 3 times.
There you go. Okay, I think if it's okay, we'll open up the floor to some questions.
Before I give the mic to somebody else, we have a southern connection. You are from the southern hemisphere, so am I. And a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks after you came here, I got a call from my cousin, which is also from Argentina. He says, her husband and you worked together for a while.
That's right. Yes, it's a small world. It keeps getting smaller.
When I first met you, I asked you how you found out about the job at Woodland Pond.
So it was through a friend, and and I in my search I hadn't seen it, but I did also know Mark Eisenhandler here, and he spoke about the culture of working at Woodland Pond, and so I knew how supportive this culture was, both from the residents and also the staff, and so that was very, very interesting to me. But
you also said you run with him.
Yes, that's exactly right. So Mark and I, we spend those Sunday mornings together. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Speaking of running, did you say that Catherine Switzer lives here?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
We should get her to come and speak. People heard that she was the first to illegally run the Boston Marathon.
That's absolutely correct.
Broke the women's barrier. A big barrier.
Yes. Yeah. No, she lives, between here and the Ridge, and her husband Roger Robinson is a very accomplished runner as well, and a writer, very well known writer about running. And they were at the Olympics too, actually. And Catherine started the women's marathon in these Olympics in Paris. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate it.